Hello everybody and welcome to my video series of IELTS preparation. Just let me introduce myself. My name is Owen, I'm from England, and I now have a website, IELTSpracticeexams.com. You see, I was an IELTS examiner in China for 2 years for the British Council. Based in Beijing, but working all over China, doing the speaking test and also marking the written tests. So since then, with that experience, I've become a freelance IELTS teacher, focusing on practice exams. If you look at my website, you'll find out. And this is a video series for Mental Bridge. In this first video, we're going to look at the marking criteria with examples, and we're going to start off with the speaking test. So, most of you will be familiar with the IELTS exam. Maybe some of you have taken it already and are going to take it again. For those of you who don't, okay, the IELTS, you get marked in 4 areas. Okay, there's speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And in this video, we're going to just focus on the speaking. So if you look at the speaking band descriptors in the video, all right, so you can see that there are 4 main things that you get marked on. So reading from left to right at the top, you can see fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. You get a score for from 1 to 9 for all of these different 4 things, and then your overall score for the speaking is the average of those. So if you get 5, 5, 6, 6, your overall for speaking will be 5.5. You probably know that already, but I'm just recapping. Okay. Anyway, so let's look at fluency and coherence. The first thing that you get marked for in the speaking. Okay, first of all, what is fluency and what is coherence? Fluency just refers to being able to speak in a natural manner without hesitation, pausing, or functionless repetition of words and phrases. You'll get an example a bit later of exactly what that sounds like. That's fluency, talking naturally without stopping, like a native speaker does. Coherence, what does that mean? That just means being logical and consistent with your answer. Does your answer make logical sense, and is it relevant to the question, what you've been asked? Okay, so we'll look at the higher grades and then the lower grades. Okay, so if you look at a band 9, if you want to achieve a high band 9 on fluency, you will have to speak fluently with only rare repetition or self-correction. Any hesitation is content related rather than to find words or grammar. Okay, speaks coherently with full appropriate cohesive features. Develops topics fully and appropriately. Okay. So, to achieve that, you will have to eliminate any repetition of what you've already said or unnatural pausing. Okay, and if you go further down the scale, let's go down to 5. Many candidates in China will score about a 5 for fluency in the speaking test. Why do they get a 5? Let's look at the marking criteria. Usually maintains flow of speech but uses repetition, self-correction and or slow speech to keep going. So this is quite clear. When you speak, you're pausing or you're repeating what's already been said. Okay, so that's what you want to try and avoid, really, to score high for fluency. Let's move on to lexical resource. what is lexical resource, another word for vocabulary really. So the larger your vocabulary and the more advanced and uncommon words you have, the higher you're going to get graded for lexical resource. So try and use some less common and more advanced words in your answer. However, you do have to use them appropriately. So let's look at the top band, band 9, uses vocabulary with full flexibility and precision in all topics, uses idiomatic language naturally and accurately. So an idiom is where the meanings of the individual words mean something different to the phrase. Like if you say, I won the competition hands down. Hands down means no contest, okay, for example. But anyway, the point to remember is try and learn some more advanced and uncommon vocabulary. Don't just stick to baby language, because if you do, you'll get probably a band 5. So if you look at the marking for band 5, manages to talk about familiar and unfamiliar topics but uses vocabulary with limited flexibility. Okay. Or even worse than that, which sometimes I found, band 4 is able to talk about familiar topics but can only convey basic meaning on unfamiliar topics and makes frequent errors in word choice. Rarely attempts paraphrase. Paraphrasing is basically rewording something differently to explain it another way, which indicates a high level of vocabulary. All right. Okay. And in between a band 5 and a band 9, you have 6, 7, and 8, depending on how good your and the range of your vocabulary. Let's now move on to grammatical range and accuracy. So if you are a student of English, you'll know what grammar is. It's the rules which govern the language, what makes it correct or incorrect. So obviously you want your sentences to be correct. That's an important part of the marking criteria. So the less errors you make, the higher you will score. However, there's something that is overlooked quite commonly. What are you being marked on? It's the grammatical range and accuracy. So to score the higher bands, you have to use a range of grammatical structures. All right? So it's not just accuracy, it's the range. So instead of giving an answer in just using, for example, the present simple, try and get some more advanced structures in there as well, like the present perfect. I have visited Thailand. Also, maybe try and go into the future as well to prove that you can use the future tense. Next year, I will study economics, or I'm going to visit somewhere. Yeah, and also more advanced, you could use the passive voice. It is often said that Beijing is a good place to visit. All right, or present perfect continuous. I have been studying geography for 3 years now. Okay, so if you do, you're definitely going to get a higher grade for grammatical range and accuracy. Okay. So yeah, just remember those two things. It's accuracy, being error-free, but also to get the highest scores using a range of structures. If you look at the criteria for band 9, uses a full range of structures naturally and appropriately. And then as you go down, yeah, the errors become more frequent, and that will drag your grade down. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to pronunciation. So pronunciation is basically how you say the words and sentences that you say. And what is the most important thing in pronunciation? It's simply to be clear, so that the examiner can understand clearly what you're saying without having to think about what you're trying to say because it's not clear. So just make sure that you pronounce your words accurately and clearly. Okay? You don't need to speak quickly or try to speak quickly. It's better to be slow and clear than fast and unclear. Okay, so yeah, if you look at the marking criteria, band 4 uses a limited range of pronunciation features. And at the bottom, mispronunciations are frequent and cause some difficulty for the listener. Okay. So if you are difficult to understand, you're just going to get a band 4 or maybe a 5 for pronunciation. So that. And if your pronunciation is clear, that's good. So you should get more than a 4 or 5. But an advanced feature of pronunciation is, if you look at band 9, for example, uses a full range of pronunciation features with precision and subtlety. So pronunciation isn't just about saying the word correctly to be understood. You can convey different meanings and emotions through your pronunciation. You know, that, for example, word stress. If you emphasize a word in a sentence to make it sound more powerful, that would be an example of using an advanced pronunciation feature. Like, for example, oh, I studied maths at school and I absolutely hated it. See how the word hated is emphasized like that, for example. Okay, so that is the marking criteria. Okay, I'm going to show you some examples of exactly what I was talking about just before. By the way, this marking criteria, if you look at it, it's publicly available. You can find it freely online. It's not secret. I mean, if you look at it, you can see it's the band descriptors, the public version. So you can find this freely on the internet and download it to keep and to study. I recommend you do. So let's just look at some examples of what I was just talking about on the marking criteria. So back to fluency and coherence. Okay, so if you look on the video at the sheet that I created, the speaking marking criteria with examples. All right. So what did I say about fluency and coherence? It means speaking in a natural, unhesitant manner without unnatural pausing or repetition of what you've already said. Let's see an example of that in action. So here's the good answer that's fluent and coherent. I'll read this out for you now. So yeah, there was this time when I had to plan my trip to America. First I had to decide on the dates to go, then book my flights online. The next thing was to arrange a tourist visa, which I also did online. During that time, I also read and researched in the Lonely Planet America guide. I decided to start in New York, then drive down to Kansas and Mississippi, and eventually arrive in Texas. I also had my friend to help me and recommend the best places to visit. Alright, so as you can hear, that is a fluent and coherent answer. So that should score an 8 or a 9 on the actual test. Here's a bad example, not so good example, of saying the same thing, the same information, but it's lacking in fluency. Here we go. So there was this time when I planned my trip to America. First I had to decide on the dates to go, then book my flights online. During that time, I also read and researched in the Lonely Planet America guide. I decided to start in New York, then drive down to Kansas and Mississippi, and eventually arrive in Texas. I also had my friend to help me and recommend the best places to visit. Okay, so in that example you can hear the pausing between words, and also in some cases repetition of what we've already said. This is what you want to avoid, guys. All right. Okay. So moving on to lexical resource. Okay. What did I say before about, yeah, the lexical resource? To score the higher marks, you've got to use a wider range of vocabulary and some more advanced, less common vocabulary. What would be an example? Okay. So regarding the sheet again, here's a good example. I visited the Philippines last year. I stayed on Boracay Island, and one day I went on a snorkeling trip to several smaller islands. Let me tell you, it was the most beautiful sea in which I have ever snorkeled. The water was a stunning azure blue, and so clean and clear, not to mention warm, and the abundance of sea life was just breathtaking. Fish of all colours of the rainbow, bright yellow to deepest blue and bright pink. Also I spotted a sea snake which lay coiled on the sea bed. It was the best snorkeling I've ever done, hands down. I would return tomorrow if I could and do it all again. Okay, so there's some good, more advanced vocabulary in there which I've also underlined on the sheet. Examples of higher level vocab that should score a higher grade for lexical resource. Let's listen to an average version of the talking about the same thing but lacking that higher level vocab. Okay, I visited the Philippines last year. I stayed on Boracay Island, and one day I went on a snorkeling trip to other islands. It was the most beautiful sea in which I have ever snorkeled. The water was a nice blue and very clean, and lots of sea life was very good. Fish of all colours, yellow, blue and pink. Also I saw a sea snake. It was the best snorkeling I've ever done. I would return tomorrow if I could and do it all again. Okay, so the average answer, saying the same thing but lacking those higher level words. Yeah, so okay. So as well, grammatical range and accuracy. Like I said before, looking at the marking criteria, so you have to get a high grade, you have to be accurate and use a range of structures. All right, so what's an example of that? Okay, so look at the sheet, grammatical range and accuracy. So here's a good answer. I've eaten many different foods, but my favorite has to be fresh seafood. It's so fresh and sweet and tastes like the sea. I also like to drink red wine when I'm eating, as it really complements the taste of the food. I've been drinking red wine since I was a teenager. Maybe my favorite food will change in the future. There are many foods I'd like to try, but haven't yet. All right. So yeah, underlined as well are these more advanced structures. So I'm proving to the examiner, you know, I have a good command of grammar and I can use these different structures. Okay. Just one thing though, you don't have to use an advanced structure in everything you say in every sentence, but you know, at least one or two times during the exam, try and get in a couple of examples of higher level grammatical structures. Okay, and here's an average example lacking those grammatical structures, higher level grammatical structures. Okay, my favorite food is fresh seafood. It's so fresh and sweet and tastes like the sea. I also like to drink red wine when I eat it, as it really complements the taste of the food. Maybe I will have a different favorite food in the future. Again, so saying the same basic thing but lacking that range of grammatical structures. So this average answer, it's correct, it's error-free, but yeah, lacking a range of structures. Again, like I said, it's not just the accuracy, it's the range of structures. All right. Okay, let's move on to pronunciation. Okay, so like I said before, with the marking criteria, most important thing is simply to be understood clearly and easily. So let's look at a good example. Okay, so I had a friend in high school. He was a real funny guy. We had such a laugh. He was loud and boisterous and was really good at doing impersonations of other people and doing funny voices. Also, he used to clown around in lessons and make funny comments. Sometimes he got in trouble with the teachers, but they still liked him. Okay, so hopefully that was clear to understand. Okay, now here's a poor example. Okay, pronunciation not so good, saying the same thing. I had a friend in high school. He was a really funny guy. We had such a laugh. He was loud and boisterous and was really good at doing impersonation of other people and doing funny voice. Also, he used clown around in lesson and make funny comments. Sometimes he got in trouble with the teacher, but they still like him. So there you go. Sometimes the candidates I had sounded like that, and it was difficult to understand what they're saying. That means a 4 or 5 for pronunciation. Okay, so there you go. That's it for the first video. I hope that was helpful. So yeah, also my website, as you can see on the document, I offer practice speaking tests and writing tests with grading and feedback to find out what level you are and how you might improve. That's IELTSpracticeexaminer.com. Okay guys, thanks very much. Hope that was useful. I'll see you in the next video.